Yeah, so before we start, generate correct motivation. Yeah. So, if consciousness, even as a human, if there's rebirth, and consciousness it takes rebirth into, sperm and the ovum, right, the fertilized egg of your future mother. Very tiny, So that grows into fetus and being born as a baby. But the initial diving into that is very small, So if that's possible, just to dive in a liquid, then maybe other rebirths also possible, right? It's very similar. The fertilized egg or animal, so then you see that our perception of this life and not believing in rebirth, and we don't know really why. So we hold so much on to this body and this life. That's why rebirth is challenging, and other rebirths even more challenging. But if you think that even for this life, then the moment, because if you accept reincarnation, then your conscience came from the previous lifetime, and then entered the fertilized egg of your current mother, right? So that's just tiny, I mean, you can't really show, but so that if conscience is able to enter something like that, then of course it can enter in other ways, right? Yeah. Or what we did with the contemplation of dying in the previous session, going to the death process. If that's really true, if conscience leaves this body and go into the bardo, right, then it's maybe also possible to have a similar state as the bardo, like a spirit realm, right? Where you just have a very subtle body, and so we didn't really explore much spirits and hell beings, but in the Lam-Rim it's very clear, and the Buddha talked about it and taught it, and Nagarjuna, great philosopher, in his letter for a friend, there's many verses on the hell realms. So if you just think that there are people, and maybe including yourself at one point of time, they're very aggressive and kill and torture, So we might have done that before as well. And if we've done that before, then you create this incredible negativity. To be born in a place is constant killing and torture, right? So if you really contemplate those aspects, then maybe there's a possibility of consciousness, instead of diving into this liquid of your future development, we call the fertilized egg, of your future mother, then maybe it dives into other aspects, or you in a kind of bardo state, like a spirit, Yeah. I mean, at first you have to see if spirits exist, but if you really go into consciousness and some meditations you do, concentration meditations, and the meditation we did on the process of death, then you see you completely withdraw, and the body just becomes secondary, and then you just leave the body, right? So, and then you go from this life to the next life, you go in bardo and things like that. So the bardo is very much like a spirit state. Yeah. So if you accept the bardo as being a possibility, then you might as well get connected with a spirit realm or something like that, right? So if we saw in the previous meditation that maybe animal is possible, I mean, you just have to work on that part quite strong, because then in the meditation you think, oh yes, maybe that's possible. And then you don't think about it for a few months, you think, no, maybe not, you know. But then maybe not, there's no real proof or reasoning behind it. It's just our habituation patterns that prevents us from understanding it, right? So if you really do the meditations we just did this morning, and also when we went into the meditation of present-human rebirth, not born in lower realms, then you see, there's logic and reasoning behind this, And the Buddha, why should the Buddha lie about hell beings and spirits and possibilities of being born as animals or all kind of creatures? There's no reason. There's just basically no reason for the Buddha to lie. And if you see the Buddha's sophisticated explanations on the mind and sophisticated explanations on reality, then they think, wow, And then you see these people who have clairvoyance, like Mahaboa, I mentioned many times. For them, there's no reason to lie, right? They see spirit realms, they see hell beings. And they see how people are born in those hellish states, So if that's really a reality, then it's another dimension that our consciousness can go, right? Yeah, so there's kind of probably a few reasons. So we haven't done it, but maybe today we can check the possibility of a spirit realm or a hell realm, Because if you really understand those aspects, then probably your initiation will be much stronger, much stronger. Our initiation is so kind of artificial that we look a bit of suffering in humans and think, oh yes, I don't want to be born in samsara. But if you don't really have the conviction of being born in hellish states and spirit realms, then your initiation will not be very genuine, right? Yeah. And then compassion also will not be very genuine. Because if you see that in video Mahaboa, probably if you really see beings wandering around in the lower realms, and you know why, then probably compassion becomes very strong, So that's in order to, because if you don't have that insight, then probably initiation and compassion is very, very artificial. So yeah, maybe there's a reason to contemplate the possibility of yourself, and then initiation becomes much more sophisticated. As you see, that video Mahaboa, so clear. So, and that's what the Buddha tried to explain, Arjuna tried to explain, Master of the Lam-Rim tried to explain, So yeah. So if you really see that possibility and then generate a real initiation, then compassion becomes much more genuine, right? Yeah, it becomes a very powerful aspect, Yeah, so maybe we have to check the possibility at first of a spirit-like existence. Yeah, so if you die, and when you die, your consciousness goes into a bardo-like state, then probably there's a possibility of staying in a similar state like a spirit realm, right? Yeah, so, yeah. And then in the spirits, we talk about hungry ghosts always as one of the main spirits we talk about, of not able to find food, big bellies and very thin throat, Just not always this fatigue. Yeah, so same what I have in a nunye. And if you do that, then you don't eat and drink, and then you feel fatigue, and there's constant fear. Fear suffering heat and cold, and then fatigue. Some spirits, they just whole families like never sleep or no time because there's fear of constant fighting of different, like people. Same with stray dogs, they fight over the territory, and human beings, they fight over the lands and things like that. So spirits, same thing. They have this constant, And there's different levels of spirits, and and in English we don't have all the terms, but so there's a constant kind of fear and fatigue and weak, and that just stays for a very long time. Yeah. So when we feel a little bit fatigued, if you go without sleep for a few nights or a night or two, you feel so tired. So spirits have that all the time. Some spirits have it all the time. Also some spirits are maybe more intelligent and things like that. But many spirits are constant, or they possess, or they abide in the place, and there's other people coming there, and then they want to get those people out, but they cannot communicate because, very confusing state. Yeah, so maybe we have to do meditation on exploring the possibility of a spirit realm. Yeah, So we do analyzing if you then, like bardo-like states, and then your conscience just drawn into previous habituation patterns of a subtle body, and then the hungry ghosts, they cannot find food when they're looking for food, and then they see something in the distance and then get closer and disappears. Or water, and they go to see, and the closer they get, disappears. So it's constant, this hunger and thirst, and then because of the fear of being attacked by others, then there's no sleep, This kind of this, if you have anxiety, that kind of constant, you're always thinking about things, you can't go to sleep. So the spirit is like probably similar to that, but then much more intense, That just prevents you from sleeping, but you get just so tired all the time, and then maybe we do that kind of contemplation, see if that's possible. Yeah, so before we do that, first, Kasa, the counting of the breath, right, as means to generate concentration. The thing is, also when you do the 9-round breathing in the morning, and then you get a little bit idea of consciousness, can happen if you do a retreat, a bit more retreat based on concentration, right? Either with the counting of the breath or with the image of the Buddha, or if you do generational completion states practices, then you have a very subtle object, right? So then that's also important for us to get some experience, right? If you get some experience of concentration, you get some experience of consciousness. If you get some experience of consciousness, then you don't identify yourself at that time that much with your physical body, right? So then your understanding of that your consciousness moves and leaves your body behind, and you can go to other realms, either as a spirit or as a God realm, then that makes more sense. When we're always stuck in this sensory perception aspect of the form realm, then of course, the desire realm, if we're always occupied with our senses in the desire realm, we can never get a taste of consciousness, and then also the contemplations related to that is a bit more difficult, right? So for that purpose also we do concentration, although the main purpose for concentration is to be able to meditate better and to get the realization of the Lam-Rim. Yeah. Okay, so let's do the counting of the breath with 2 mental factors, alertness and mindfulness. Yeah. So let's do that for about, let's say, a minute or two. Yeah. Yeah, so then to conclude the concentration meditation, then we move into imagine Sakyamuni Buddha in front. Yeah, so think in front of yourself, about a body length away, appears Sakyamuni Buddha, right? Aspect of the Buddha, but in nature of one's teacher. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a throne and lotus, sun and moon disk, and on top of that, it's made out of light, right? A three-dimensional image of Guru Buddha, right? Sakyamuni. So imagine that. Also here, you try to build that image. It's also a way to develop concentration. You spend kind of, let's say, a little bit time. Let's do that for half a minute. Just build up the image, and then for half a minute you concentrate on what you have. Yeah. So for half a minute you just build up the image and try to imagine the throne and the lotus and the sun, moon disk, and the Buddha seated on top of that. So the smiling face and the mudras of the hand. Try to build up the image first for let's say half a minute, and then for half a minute concentrate on what you build up. Yeah. So, or if that's still a bit challenging, then just imagine the Buddha's there, right? So let's do that 2 times half a minute, then. Yeah. Yeah, so think that Guru Buddha is actually there, right? And then surrounding yourself, see those beings wandering around in the animal realm, and we just saw the suffering they're undergoing of eating each other and hunger, thirst, constantly fatigue and fear of being eaten alive. And then the spirit's a very confused state, also of hunger and thirst, suffering and fear and fatigue. And they're just wandering around like sometimes you see a fly just going here and there, bump against the window and go back, and just like that. That's beings are just wandering around, and just from one suffering to the other, no escape. And then think you have to help them, and for that purpose, first of all, you have to prevent yourself falling into lower realms, and for that purpose, you have to understand the suffering of the lower realms, right? That's why we do the meditation. And looking at those beings being stuck in suffering, we request the Guru Buddha in front to bestow blessings, to train our minds to be able to develop and help them later on. So make request to Guru Buddha like that. And then the Buddha is very pleased, and from his heart comes this white nectar light, right? So either in a tube or like this straw or this thread with the light, and then the liquid aspect of the nectar flowing from the Buddha's heart through your crown and all beings, and then descending, and then your body gets filled with this white nectar light. Yeah? That purifies and remove obstacles. And then, if you like, you can recite the mantra. If that's too much for you, then you just do the visualization, right? Yeah. And otherwise, you can recite the mantra Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Soa for yourself, quietly. Yeah. Yeah. So do this visualization with the white light for about half a minute. So then imagine you're completely filled, with this white nectar light, completely purified. Then with the same focus upon those beings in suffering realms, make a request to the Buddha, and this time the yellow nectar light comes, to the pipe or straw or kind of thread with light, and then the moisture, nectar around it and filling your whole body. So this golden yellow nectar light now to get the insights into Lam-Rim in particular, the possibility and the suffering of spirits and things like that. So imagine you get those insights by receiving this yellow light. So also that you can do with a mantra, Muni Muni Ma Muni Soa, if you like, or just visualize the light by itself, either way. Also that we do for about half a minute. So then think you're completely filled with this yellow nectar light, right? And your mind is really easy to go exactly according to the Dharma, to understand what we have to understand. And then we do the actual analytical meditation. So first, see that, as we did in the previous meditation, if consciousness continues, and even when it takes, at the time of conception, you dive into your future mother as this like a very tiny liquid of, ovum and sperm, but the consciousness goes in there. So is that possible? Then maybe, because of previous habituation patterns, you can be born as an animal, as we saw, like go back in history and see pre-humans, and if that's possible, then dive into something like an animal may be also possible, right? Because of those previous imprints of being dead before. So then see the possibility of being born, first of all, in the animal realm, right, as we did before. So try to analyze that again for about a minute or so. And then in a similar way, if you think about the dream state, when you find yourself in a dream, it's very confusing sometimes. So if you die and you go into the bardo, it's very similar, right? It's very confusing. And then, because of previous habituation patterns, you might as well just stay in a similar state like that in the bardo, or be born in this spirit-like existence. Yeah? So I think is it possible? If you see the death process and you leave this body behind and you go in this confusing bardo state, if that's possible, then maybe it's also possible to have a similar subtle body and be born as a spirit, in a kind of other dimension, like the spirit realm, Yeah, so check if that's possible or not. For, let's say also about a minute or so, yeah. So then, if you always are extremely attached to your own things and never share any things with others, this kind of very narrow-minded, my happiness, my this, my that, I need this, I need that. Very narrow-minded of your own kind of grieving and grasping at your personal happiness, then might as well in the spirit realm, it's very much similar to that. That you only, have this confusing, narrow-minded state. So once you're born there, then finding food and drink is extremely difficult. There's constant suffering of hunger and thirst, and then you see some food, but then the closer you get, it disappears. And then there's very intense fatigue because of the fear of other spirits haunting you or using black magic, constantly. So see how that feels if you can't sleep anymore and there's this mind and complete anxiety. We're not able to find food and drink and completely disturbed wherever you go. It's kind of dangerous or fear or no food, no drink. Constantly being stuck in this kind of confusion for a long time. How would that feel? You yourself in there. Yeah, so analyze that for yourself for about 2 minutes. And then once you're stuck in that state, because the habituation patterns, you might be reborn again and again in similar kind of dimensions, right? Very difficult to get out. Yeah, so see, that's one of the greatest dangers, Yeah, so analyze that also for about half a minute. And then just recall in the previous session of the animal state, the possibility of being reborn there, and the intense sufferings of eating each other, and fear and hunger and thirst and stupidity of jumping into the fire and don't know where to go in bushfires. To have a look at that as well, to recall that from the previous meditation for about, let's say a minute. And then see, also in that state, it's impossible to get out. Constant habituation to negative deeds of killing each other and, just confused and pain and suffering, and the mind is only occupied with that, nothing else. So there's no way you create courses to get out. Yeah, so look at that also for about half a minute. Because once you're born there, and then it's impossible then to meet the teachings, and then whenever there's opportunity to come back, then the teaching might have disappeared, right? So see that we have to prevent ourselves from falling in those states of animals and spirits, kind of states of existence, right? So generate a wish not to be born there. Yeah. So and then concentrate on that kind of conclusion or wish for about half a minute. And then make a determination to practice morality and to practice the Lam-Rim the best way you can to prevent yourself from falling in those states, right? And concentrate on that kind of commitment or determination for about half a minute. All right, so then we can stop. Relax for a minute or two, three. Then we can do a trip to the hells. Once Lama Zopa in the early days, Lama Zopa used to teach on the hells quite a lot. I heard many years ago, I think it was in the early 80s, I was not a Buddhist yet. One center, Rinpoche was teaching all night long. And it was already, extended teaching. And there was, in the early days, many new people. It was all on the hells. And then people had to go to work the next day. I think almost everybody left. There was nobody in the tent. And Rinpoche was still teaching. So he was probably not teaching to humans at that time. You see? That's very interesting. Geshe Lama Kuncho in Tibet. Before he did his retreat, he was already quite a special person, He was also teaching in his room. People heard him teaching, but they knew there was nobody in the room except himself. Very interesting, yeah. So then, if those beings, highly realized beings, they spend so much time with Lama Zopa Rinpoche every day, the water offering for the spirits. If Rinpoche does it every day, there's a reason, right? So then Rinpoche knows there are spirits there to benefit, Every day, Rinpoche does for so many years, every day water offering, so many years. Every time Rinpoche, wherever was, he had also have a bucket and clean and all the time, right? So that's a sign that Rinpoche doesn't do that, just show off or something. Rinpoche was so kind of against the eight worldly dharmas, but constantly thinking benefiting beings, right? If it's humans, animals, or spirits, or hell beings, constantly. Yeah. So if that's the case, then why would a person do that, or Geshe Lama Kunchok teach to non-humans, right? Yeah, that's for us important to see those stories, because they are people we have faith in and trust. And if they do these things for spirits, then they should exist, right? Yeah. So, and the Buddha talked about it, and Agnarjuna talked about it. And then they benefit them, yeah? And there's no reason for them to show off or lie about these things, right? So that's, for us, important to see, to analyze, Because our mind is so habituated to this life and this body and things like that. And then it's just difficult to understand, Because as I said before, if you don't have clairvoyance to see that, then it's just, we're just stuck in our sensory perception. Yeah. So that's important to work on, That, that you see these great beings, they teach non-humans, right? They try to benefit non-humans, There's many stories like that. People who do sur, I think it was sister, how's her name? The sister of Dechen, nun from Taiwan. I forgot her name. Rinpoche mentioned once. She was in the US, I forgot which center, maybe. Rinpoche's house, Aptos, I'm not sure. So she started to do more sur, Rinpoche's advice. Sur offering, to spirits. And then one day she was between asleep and awake, and then the mind was a bit subtle, and then the little spirits came to say thank you. So this, that happens. That they have a different dimension. So for us, we live in different dimensions, so we can communicate normally, right? But if your consciousness gets a little bit subtle, that's what happened here in the wake sleep state. Then there's kind of connection, right? So, and of course, people like Lama Zopa Rinpoche and before Geshe Lama Kunchok and Kandrila, those kind of, highly realized beings, His Holiness, they see, they can see that. Yeah, so they can communicate. They don't show that in ordinary appearance because people don't understand, so they don't talk about it. Yeah, that's very clear. Kandrila, in public she doesn't say things, but sometimes if you know her a bit and you talk, private stories or over meals in Tibetan, because if you're in the West, most people don't know Tibetan, so you can talk about things. We had also great fun. We had a lot of Maybe we went for a walk, but also during meals, very interesting stories. And you see this person lives in a completely different world, different dimension, you know. And then, because our ordinary mind think, oh, yeah, it's all nonsense, it's all crazy, and things like that. But if you see Lam Rinpoche making offerings, and then the Sur offering, and then some people they see, there was one monk in Gyume, Dratsang, Gyume monastery. He was not very scholar, not great meditator, but every day he said, I benefited hundreds of beings. Because every day he did Sur, you know, and then he read the Gyu Samaja Urutantra also every day. So, So if those people do that, it's not just ritual, right? They actually see there's benefit, you know. So there's no reason for them to show off or to lie about it, and mostly they just hide it and don't talk about it. But you can see. So there is another dimension, right? There's another realm, you know, for sure. Yeah. So if animal birth is possible and spirit birth is possible, then the hells where they talk about is probably very similar, right? That if you get, you know, if you look at violence, in gang violence or war, that people torture each other in very extreme ways, you can imagine that. What kind of result would that bring? You know, if you really think the mind is constant anger and fighting and killing and torturing and things like that, you know, then you can imagine that at one time you're born in a place, there's just a mental dimension and there's nothing else than that, right? There's just constantly being cut and cutting others and like that, constantly, right? And because it's a subtle body, then it's kind of, you die, but at the same time it's like in a dream, it's still the same thing again, and then it happens over and over and over and over again. So you can imagine that that at the moment we live in a quite peaceful environment. But when you're born in a war zone or gang violence as a young child, your habituation patterns will follow what people do, right? Now we say, oh yeah, I promise not to kill. But if you're born in that situation and your mind is not trained properly, then you just follow what other people do. You fight the enemy and you kill. And that's just common understanding, that you have to defend your country and you have to kill the enemy. So you do the same thing, you know? So if that's the case, then you might have done that many times. And then at the time of death, there's a kind of strong irritation or anger, So one person he was in the sheep, and he became Buddhist monk, and a very good one, though he had a lot of obstacles. But so his father was still in the business, and he told me when his father died, very sad. It's very completely disturbed and shouting, very difficult, you know. So you can imagine if you have killed like thousands and thousands of sheep or animals like that, or those things like we see in the US, and maybe also in Europe, I'm not sure, where one factory, like 4 stories, where every day, like, was it 90,000 pigs. So if you walk in an environment like that, you know, or you actually go engage in the act of killing for years, you know, then we might have done that in previous lifetimes, right? If your culture is like that, and that's, you don't understand that animal has feeling, and you don't understand the morality of animal rights or things like that, you can just follow what other people do and it's normal, right? So then you can imagine that we might have done those things, and when those aspects come to ripening, you might be born in a place where there's this constant violence, you know? So similar to a hellish state, right? Yeah, so then you see, wow, you know, that if you're born in those states of extensive suffering for a long period of time, of course, there's no Dharma possible, there's just only experiencing suffering. And you might fight the enemy, and the enemy fights you, and it's constant. Yeah. So yeah, maybe we try to see if that's possible. Yeah. So check for yourself. If you were born first in previous lifetimes, then we can go back to humans like 40,000 years ago, and then this ape-like people, or whatever you call them. We might have been born in those stages, and then fighting the enemy. And see gorillas, very aggressive, they just kill whoever is from the other tribe, without argument, just whenever they come close, they kill them. So if that's the case, and you've been in those kind of violent, or in the Middle Ages, those people fighting each other with swords and spears and what is it, bow and arrow and things like that, and torture each other. And so if you have been born in those periods and engage in those kind of activities over a long period of time, then maybe there's a habituation pattern that comes to ripening in these kind of hellish states, Yeah, so see if that's possible. If your consciousness in a dream, like this kind of horrifying kind of, nightmare, but then in a more reality, in a reality of not just a few minutes dream, but a long period of time, in a kind of dimension of spirits or hell beings. Maybe that's possible. Yeah. So if your consciousness goes from this life to the next, and then because of the habituation patterns of the past that get triggered, maybe it's possible to be born in this dimension of what we call the hell, or yeah. So check if that's if you think that is possible or not, and what are the reasons for the possibility, and what are the reasons for that is not possible. Right? So just analyze that for yourself. Let's say for about 2 minutes. Yeah. So if there's a possibility, then maybe you can imagine how it would be to be in a place that you could be almost fried alive and be, cut into pieces, and you try to survive and try to cut the other person, or, attack. And then you try to escape that, and then there's this forest with, blades instead of leaves, and then you get cut, or you go and fall into this quicksand with creatures just eating you alive from underneath, So how would that feel if you in either of those hot hells or surrounding hells where there's constant suffering, without end, because of previous habituation patterns. It's just this violence, anger kind of creation. So how would that feel if you're in the middle of that? Yeah, so analyze that for yourself for about a minute or so. And then come to a conclusion that sees that I have to prevent this from happening, right? And then focus on that for about half a minute. And then think I have to prevent myself from falling in those states, so I have to engage in practice of morality, one thing, and develop myself in Lam-Rim and do some purification on the side. And to, do that, and also try to, apply the antidote towards anger, for the, it's very important also, so try to make that commitment for yourself to practice morality the best way you can, practice the Lam-Rim the best way you can, and to counteract this anger, to practice more patience, to prevent. So come to those three kind of commitments for yourself and focus on that. That's what you're going to do, to use this precious human rebirth before it's too late, to not fall in those states. I'm going to practice morality, I'm going to practice the Lam-Rim, and I'm going to practice patience, and I'm going to generate a prayer to move into the Lam-Rim and to help those beings in those states, to get a precious human rebirth, develop myself. So come to that conclusion, focus on that for yourself for about half a minute. So then we can request Sakyamuni Buddha to bestow blessings and inspirations to actually be able to do that. And then the Buddha comes to the crown of your head and facing the same direction. The throne dissolves into the lotus. And then the Buddha becomes smaller, descends to your crown, throat, and the level of your heart. Imagine the Buddha dissolves into light, and the Buddha's qualities merge with your own mind. I think that happens there. You feel very kind of peaceful and blissful kind of happiness there, and that you've got the qualities of the Guru Buddha in your mind. Yeah, so then dedicate. Janjo Semjo Rinpoche Magye Panangegu Geva Nyamba Mepa Yang Gone Gonde Bawa Shu Toni Tawa Rinpoche Magye Panangegu Geva Nyamba Mepa Yang Gone Gonde Bawa Gewa Gunde Yanda Lama Dan Dame Chugi Bela Lunjin Sadan Lamgi Yunda Razuni Doje Changi Gobanyo Toshu. Okay, yeah, so break. Yeah, don't go to the hells in the break, okay?